Exception number 1 to section 384.16 of the National Electrical Code addresses an exception to the general rule that panel boards must have overcurrent protection. This exception specifically applies to lighting and appliance branch circuit panel boards as defined in section 384.14 subsection A. To reiterate, the exception states that a panel board is not required to have a main overcurrent protective device if its feeder has overcurrent protection not greater than the panel board's rating. Let's break down what this means in simpler terms. First, consider what a panel board is. In residential electrical systems, the panel board, sometimes called a breaker box or load center, is a metal enclosure that houses circuit breakers. These circuit breakers protect individual circuits within the home from overloads and short circuits. The panel board receives power from the utility company through a feeder, which is a set of conductors that carries electricity from the service entrance to the panel board. Now, let's delve into the lighting and appliance branch circuit panel board definition as outlined in section 384.14 subsection A. This section specifies that a lighting and appliance branch circuit panel board is one having more than 10% of its overcurrent devices rated 30 amps or less, for which neutral connections are provided. In other words, it's a panel board that primarily serves lighting and small appliance circuits. This is commonly found in residential settings where you have numerous 15 amp and 20 amp circuits for lights, receptacles, and small appliances, as well as some 30 amp circuits. Now, let's focus on exception number 1 to section 384.16. This exception allows certain lighting and appliance branch circuit panel boards to be installed without a main circuit breaker or disconnect within the panel board itself. The key condition that must be met for this exception to apply is that the feeder supplying the panel board must be protected by an overcurrent protective device such as a circuit breaker or fuses that is not larger than the panel board's ampacity rating. The panel board's ampacity rating refers to a maximum amount of current that the panel board is designed to safely handle. This rating is typically marked in the panel board enclosure. Consider an example. Suppose you have a 100 amp rated lighting and appliance branch circuit panel board in a home. The feeder supplying this panel board runs from the main service disconnect, which is the main point where electricity enters the home. If the feeder is protected by a 100 amp circuit breaker at the main service disconnect, then exception number 1 to section 384.16 would allow you to install the panel board without a main circuit breaker within the panel board itself. In this scenario, the 100 amp circuit breaker at the main service disconnect serves as the overcurrent protection for the feeder and effectively protects the panel board from being overloaded. Conversely, if the feeder were protected by a 125 amp circuit breaker at the main service disconnect, then exception number 1 to section 384.16 would not apply. In this case, you would be required to install a main circuit breaker within the 100 amp rated panel board itself to provide adequate overcurrent protection. Why is this exception allowed? The rationale behind exception number 1 is that if the feeder supplying the panel board is already adequately protected by an overcurrent device that is no larger than the panel board's rating, then an additional main circuit breaker within the panel board would be redundant. The overcurrent device at the feeder effectively provides the same level of protection. It's important to note that while exception number 1 allows for the omission of a main circuit breaker or disconnect within the panel board, it does not eliminate the need for a disconnecting means. Section 408.36 requires that each panel board be provided with a disconnecting means that is readily accessible to the user. This disconnecting means can be the feeder breaker that supplies the panel board, or it can be a separate switch or circuit breaker located at the panel board. The purpose of the disconnecting means is to allow a person to safely de-energize the panel board for maintenance or repair. Now, let's summarize the key points regarding exception number 1 to section 384.16. Firstly, the exception applies to lighting and appliance branch circuit panel boards as defined in section 384.14 subsection A. Secondly, the feeder supplying the panel board must be protected by an overcurrent device that is not larger than the panel board's ampacity rating. Thirdly, the exception allows for the omission of a main circuit breaker or disconnect within the panel board itself. Fourthly, a disconnecting means must still be provided at the panel board. And fifthly, it is best to consult with a qualified electrical inspector to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, is a comprehensive set of standards that govern the safe installation of electrical wiring and equipment. It is updated every 3 years, and it is essential for electricians, contractors, and anyone involved in electrical work to be familiar with its requirements. The NEC is not law itself, but it is widely adopted by state and local jurisdictions, and it becomes law when it is incorporated into building codes. Understanding the NEC is crucial for ensuring the safety of electrical installations and preventing electrical hazards. Electrical safety is paramount. Electricity can be dangerous, and improper electrical work can lead to fires, shocks, and other hazards. It is crucial to follow all applicable codes and regulations when working with electricity, and to always use qualified and licensed electricians for any electrical work that you are not comfortable performing yourself. If you are unsure about any aspect of electrical work, it is always best to consult with a qualified professional. Remember to always turn off the power at the main service disconnect before working on any electrical circuits. Use appropriate personal protective equipment, such as insulated gloves and safety glasses. Never work upon live electrical circuits. If you are not comfortable working on electrical circuits, do not attempt to do so. Contact a qualified and licensed electrician. In conclusion, exception number 1 to section 384.16 of the National Electrical Code provides a specific allowance for omitting a main over current protected device in certain lighting and appliance branch circuit panel boards, provided that the feeder supplying the panel board is adequately protected. This exception is based on the principle that the feeder over current protection effectively safeguards the panel board, rendering an additional main breaker redundant. However, it is crucial to ensure that all other applicable code requirements, such as the provision of a disconnecting means, are met to maintain electrical safety and code compliance. Always consult the latest edition of the NEC and seek guidance from qualified electrical professionals to ensure that electrical installations are safe, reliable, and in accordance with all applicable regulations. The correct interpretation and application of these codes are essential for the safety and functionality of electrical systems in residential, commercial, and industrial settings.